Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at ARM holdings. It is time for another update, and today we discuss the structure within the correction here within the wave 2. And before we get there, I would like to go quickly through the large time frame for any of you who might be new to provide the full context. So here we have been tracking this as an ABC pattern in a wave 1. Now we would expect after a 3-wave correction in a wave 2 to form an ABC structure within a wave 3. Part of a larger leading diagonal. We would expect continued upside for this interpretation, and while a reset wouldn't be impossible or even problematic because we would still have room within the area of support for such a reset, we would prefer to have already started the larger pattern to the upside. Now, does this need to form the entire leading diagonal? Absolutely not. I could also track this as an ABC pattern, in which case a single 5-wave move to the upside, as we have here depicted in the yellow interpretation, could be sufficient to build this larger structure. The same way we have here within the subdivision of this move to the upside, an ABC structure. We could build a larger A. This could have formed only a wave A, a wave B correction here, and then a wave C to the upside. Now, in the end, we could track this idea of a 5-wave structure within both the wave C interpretation and the idea of a larger wave 3, but this would then need to be only the wave A to the upside. In the end, I wouldn't necessarily focus too much on which interpretation is more likely between those two, because I would expect within both cases, after this initial 5-wave move to the upside, to have a 3-wave correction, and at the very least another 5-wave move to the upside that would very likely take us into the new all-time high territory. So on this chart, within this time frame, we actually do have an interesting potential, an interesting area of support to track for continuation higher. I am tracking this as an actual trade setup, but I want you to be reminded that from a large time frame perspective, this is a 3-wave move to the upside. This isn't going to provide us the high probabilities for a 3-wave correction and the reversal. Even if it does, it doesn't mean that it was a high probability trade setup for us. Now, since within the smaller time frame we are able to track such an idea that would allow an extension higher, I will be looking with high interest for this 1-2 setup that we have been tracking for the reversal, for the correction into the area of support between the $133.5 all the way down to the $95.6 level at the 78.6% retracement. And personally, I have been a little skeptical of this setup, so I wasn't necessarily looking to rush into positions within this area of support, especially based on the initial movement, the initial structure to the downside that I could actually even track as a 5-wave pattern. But especially now, since we are within such low levels in the area of support, we are in very deep support, the risk-reward ratio is becoming more and more attractive. This allows us to look for positions and for accumulation within these deep levels, while knowing that below the 78.6% retracement, a sustained break below that would signal that this structure is likely going to fail. We would then not have the high probability continuation higher, we would not have an initial 5-wave move to the upside to look for a correction within the area of support. And even though this area of support in white would still stand, I would not be considering this as a chart that I would be looking for continuation higher for a position, and below the 78.6% retracement in white would actually even signal that this structure could have a more significant failure. If we fail to hold this interpretation in yellow, I would be waiting for the next structure that would allow us to track an initial 5-wave move to the upside. I won't be looking for a position within this even deeper area of support, because it would not have the same depiction of the market sentiment that would be as bullish. Now, with that said, we can move on into the smaller time frame, and in this area we have been tracking an ABC pattern to form. I have provided you the ideal target for the wave C we would expect within this area, although I do want to remind you that this is just that, an ideal target, and we don't need to get there, and at the same time we don't need to stop there, but it certainly is a level the wave C is generally drawn towards. Now, within this structure we actually had a full count, so we will be talking about that in a moment, but here we are watching the $98.5 level. We also have additional structural support around this area, and it basically goes all the way down to the 78.6% retracement. I would strongly expect that even if we don't ultimately hold the area of support within yellow, we could very easily still see a reversal, at least in a relief rally, because we do have these major bottoms that have formed at these levels. Yeah, we can track, we can see that they are very much in line with the 78.6% retracement, at least this one before this massive push to the upside, and then this one is a little bit higher. We don't even need to get to that last level of support, by the way, but I would be interested in seeing how it can interact with those levels. Now, in the previous video, we have been focusing specifically on the wave C to the downside within this area, where I provided you exactly the day before we actually topped within this wave 4, this area of resistance where we couldn't have been looking for a significant bottom to be in place before we broke the last level, the 61.8% retracement at the $128.5 level. And surely enough, we only managed to push into the ideal target for the wave 4 before continuing and basically building enough of a pattern to have had a possible correction in this wave 2 complete, but it seems like it might want to go for another low before it actually starts the next wave to the upside. So this is not really a problem. We have even been tracking the idea of an impulse to form within this area, and now I would only need to adjust the count, or rather the structure we were tracking, because we were tracking here an internal 1-2 setup. So now I would consider this to be a 1, 2, 3, 4th, and the 5th. With the larger wave 3 complete, now I'm looking for this to be a 1-2 setup, have here a larger wave 3, have a wave 4 correction, and the 5th wave to possibly form another low. And I do want to address this. You may be thinking, is it possible to have already bottomed? And I would say that it is possible, but based on the structure that we actually see right now in this downtrend, it seems rather unlikely. We haven't necessarily formed yet a reliable pattern to the upside, an initial 5-wave move. And it also is within a very, very small time frame, so I would be extremely cautious, but I will be able to provide you here the relevant levels of resistance to watch for a signal that, if broken, the bottom is much more likely to already be in place. Now, for this, I would instead be tracking fully and solely the idea of an impulse for this correction, and I would be watching the last level of resistance to be up to the 50% retracement. So we would consider the levels between the $110.5 all the way up to the $120.7 level. We can notice that within this area, actually I didn't get to adjust this as well to the beginning of this wave 3, but yeah, to the $121 level, basically a small shift within that area. Now, you may notice that we only got a wick above this last level of resistance, which is not substantial. Yeah, this is not a sustained break above the last level of resistance. It's a signal that this structure hasn't been invalidated, this idea of a 5th wave to still form within this area. And if we actually manage to break above the last swing high at the $123.6, it would be a strong signal that a more significant bottom would already be in place. Now, would that be certainty? Of course not, especially based on the internal structure that we have within this area, but as of right now, I actually prefer that we form another low within this structure. Yeah, we could very well get into the ideal target for the wave C in the end, and even though this structure does have a full count, it clearly has room for another low, so I would not rule out such a possibility. Now, in terms of this push to the downside, I wouldn't look too much into the exact structure. We could even track some area of support for a more direct continuation higher, but anything then a very generic correction in a wave B in this area, which again, 3-wave move to the upside, it's not going to be a high probability trade setup. But other than this, nothing too significant we could actually track, so I would be watching here the levels down to the $106.3, and the break below the 78.6% retracement would be a reinforcement that this structure is going into new lows, is going to form the 5th wave and complete the larger pattern in this area. And in terms of the internal count within this area, I could consider something like a 1, 2, 1, 2, 3rd wave that could be ongoing, a 4th and a 5th, and then another 4, 5 to complete the structure. Does it need to unfold this way? Definitely not. Just an idea of how we could see this structure unfold. In the end, I'm not outruling a bottom. Even now, I could consider this to be just an ABC structure that could form a low sooner rather than later, but even within this interpretation, I would probably prefer a little additional push to lower prices, but honestly, I won't be looking too much into such a small time frame. These areas do morph and distort all the time, and they are just not reliable, yeah? Now, I want to reinforce once again, I personally find this large area of support in yellow between the $133.5 all the way down to the $95.6 pretty interesting. It's not necessarily from the largest time frame perspective that it is interesting. Yeah, we actually have only a 3-wave pattern to the upside. Even this structure is not the most clear 5-wave move, but it is deep within the area of support, and as always, it is best to focus on the levels, yeah? Trade the levels, not the count, and in the end, if it fails, we would have quite an early signal, a break below the 78.6% retracement, a sustained break, not what we did here, into the 50% retracement at the $121 in the white scenario. Yeah, this was not a sustained break, not sufficient to consider this bottom in place. But yeah, a sustained break below it would be a strong signal that this structure is ultimately going to fail, and a break below the beginning of this entire wave 1 would be the ultimate invalidation, and we would not even be able to track such a scenario. And for now, these are the levels, this is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and let me know what else you want me to cover, and I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.